It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today we're looking ahead to Sunday's game against Spurs at Craven Cottage. We didn't get 3 points against Tottenham earlier this season. Tom Kearney's red card put paid to that. Can we get another win though against Tottenham Hotspur at Craven Cottage? Can't call them Tottenham anymore. That would be sacrilege. I'm joined on the Thursday Club by Jack Collins. Hello.
Hello, Sammy. Yeah, you can go Spurs though, so it's all right.
You can say Spurs, you can say Tottenham Hotspur, but don't you dare call them Tottenham.
Or Tottenham Hotspur FC if you really want to go with the full shebang. But anyway, unless we want to incur the wrath of Daniel Levy.
Yeah, I would not want to do that.
Not me.
No.
Not me.
We'll also have the final word on our defeat, our last-minute defeat at Brighton. We'll also be talking about the Crystal Palace ticket debacle. In this. How
often have we said the words ticket debacle on this podcast this season?
Wouldn't be the Fulhamish podcast about a ticket debacle. I know that I had a message from someone that said, I enjoy the Fulhamish podcast. Whenever you talk about tickets, I just get a bit bored. So apologies if hearing about tickets is boring. We'll tell you when it comes and goes, and you can skip over
timestamp it.
You can skip over that bit if you want. But first, we're not talking about tickets. We'll talk about Brighton on Saturday. Obviously, disappointing.
Yeah,
you can't lose in the last minute of any game, friendly or league match or cup match, and not be a bit like, oh, that's annoying. I think for me, the disappointing part of this was like ultimately, I think Fulham were pretty good for a point. I don't think we played amazingly, but we were a small moment of madness away from getting a decent point at a tough ground. And that's just a bit hard to swallow, because ultimately I think had Fulham got away with a 1-1 draw, I think we'd all be saying didn't play well, but we got something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, Brighton were definitely the better team. Yeah. I think there's no doubt about that. And sometimes when one of those moments for a better team, we've had them the other way this season, right? When you get that moment of release, having been the better side, it's like it feels like justice as opposed to anything else. And I imagine that's how a lot of Brighton fans would have felt walking out of the stadium.
Especially given the record that they've had against Fulham over the years, where they've really not had the rub of the green. I imagine a lot of Brighton fans particularly enjoyed that one.
Yeah,
fair play.
100%. And look, the right to enjoy it. They're on a cracking run at the moment. They're playing really well. I thought that they were the better side pretty much for 90 minutes. I thought Fulham defended pretty well first half, and then the second half there were moments, but in many ways, the second half reminded me of a former Leicester City legend, because it was all Brighton. And when you kind of come to that conclusion with all of it, it does feel like justice was kind of served on this Fulham team. And the frustrations with the way that we set up, frustrations with the way that we attacked, I thought that we left ourselves short. There's a brilliant piece from Dan Cook on Sunday's podcast about this, but the way that Fulham left ourselves isolated in attacking areas with the five at the back system. And I appreciate Juan Marco went to it. One, it always feels harsh when Issa Diop drops out of the side because he's not really put a foot wrong this season. And two, without Sasa Lukic, I can understand why they tried to further aim, but it just didn't really work. And what really frustrated me was Fulham's inability to get down that left-hand side. And I think Anthony Robinson works best when he's coming from deeper positions. There is more to that than this, and Dan kind of went into it in depth, so I'm not going to do it again. But the way that Anthony Robinson really explodes past teams and creates overloads and opens up opportunities is from deeper positions. And what we do when we're playing in a 4 with Anthony Robinson at left back is that Calvin Bassey scoots across into that left back position and we kind of shift it into a 3. But it involves Timmy Castagna coming back and being the other side of the kind of centre-back partnership. And Castagna played well. I thought he was good down that right-hand side, but he still wasn't the attacking thrust down that right-hand side. So it's not like we really lost anything from having him further back. I thought he defended well and he did enough down that side. But think about the goal. Think about the best opportunity that Fulham create. It's Alex Iwobi, who is basically playing the wing-back role, who picks up the ball on the edge of our own box and bursts down the flank to put in a cross. That's what you expect your wing-back to be doing, not the midfielder in front of the wing-back in that system. And so I think we were stifled by that because there was no longer those bodies. We weren't able to create any overloads down that left-hand side, and it left Anthony Robinson basically with a one-on-one, and Jack Hinshelwood marshalled him really, really well. So I think the frustration for me was that wasn't changed earlier. I can completely understand, and I'm not sitting here Captain Hindsight going, I wouldn't have started 5 at the back, because I thought it was probably the right move ahead of kickoff. But I do think we have to be a little bit smarter in terms of adapting our game plans throughout in order to get the best out of certain players, and didn't really feel like we ever got to that stage against Brighton.
No. What did you think of the penalty? I don't... Yeah.
I want it.
I didn't think there was too much debate to be had. It's just...
Harrison Reed's got a lot of stick for giving it away. And look, whilst I think it's a little bit wild to try and make that challenge in an area where Joao Pedro's not going anywhere, I think most people would have tried to clear it in that situation. He didn't see him coming from behind him. Like, I can't blame Harrison Reed.
I weirdly saw it. It felt like, I don't know if I had a premonition or I just fear that every time that opposition wanders into the Fulham box in the 95th minute. But I felt like I saw the future about 10 seconds before. It just screamed like, we're going to give away a pen here. I don't know why. It's too many bodies in here. It feels like something's going to go wrong.
It was busy, wasn't it?
It was an odd feeling of just, I feel like something bad's gonna happen. Harrison Reed's an interesting one because I'd called before the game for him to start. I thought that was the move. I thought that if you haven't got Sasa Lukic, I feel like Harrison Reed is not far off a ready-made replacement to sit in the middle. For me, if you're Harrison Reed, and if the player probably closest to my skill set gets suspended and I am fit, and you're still not getting the start, and then think something like this happens, you've got to wonder if you're Harrison Reed, like, what am I doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's probably mitigating circumstances there in that it wasn't that Fulham went like for like and replaced him with someone else. They completely changed the system in order to try and accommodate it. And it's not like Fulham were trying this system for the first time. It's something that's been successful, especially away from home at times this season, right?
Yeah.
You know, you look at the Wolves game, you look at the Chelsea game. It's been a pretty useful fallback for Marco Silva. So there's that, and I think that that's probably worth considering in the discussion around it. I'd go one further. I didn't think that Harrison Reed should have started this game, and we spoke about this on last week's Thursday Club. I would start him. I would start him on Sunday.
Okay.
I would go back to the 4 and I would start him on Sunday. And we can come into all the Tottenham bits and bobs, but I think that would be a show of faith in a player who's been a wonderful servant for the club, who's still a very, very good footballer, and who made a mistake and is getting, in my view, untoward pelters for making an error, which I think a lot of players would have made. But I also think it would sort out some of the problems that we saw, in this Brighton game. And look, there are frustrations I have. One of them is the marking, obviously, and in the Jan-Paul van Hecke goal where he's left completely on his own. Yes, there's a clever block, but it was coming. And also, we should be aware of clever blocks because we tried them for a full season in the Championship where we'd use a player to block off another. We do it still now. There's a little bit of that in the Man United goal that we score in the first half of that game. So we should be aware, especially after it's been tried once to us, that we need to be able to pick these players up in the right areas. And I thought that it really was one of those moments where Fulham get in at halftime 1-0 up, then we probably get a point. And I think that, considering it felt like Brighton went straight down the other end and scored, it really did kind of take the wind out of Fulham's sails as a counter-attacking team. And, as what game states are like. When you're playing a team and you're huffing and puffing to try and equalise and you're throwing men forward and forward and forward and they have a lead, they're far more likely to catch you on the break. And if we were trying to play in transition, if we were trying to play with that system, which is obviously where the goal comes from, you open up the game even more for that. And I think that at 1-1, Fulham weren't sure whether to stick or twist. And I don't mean just in the last sort of 10 minutes. I mean the full second half. It felt like Fulham just was stuck between stations in terms of whether that was Marco, whether that was the players on the pitch, of being like, doing the switch formations, this isn't necessarily working. Do we need to bring on more attacking players? Are we going to settle in here and stick with the point? From almost half time, the reason I think Brighton were able to get such a hold on the game was because Fulham didn't know where they were coming or going, and it allowed a very good, very competent Brighton side who are in a good run of form to get into their head of steam in a way that we hadn't really allowed in the first half in the same kind of way.
Yeah. I just see it as one of those defeats that I think any side could have gone to Brighton in the pretty much entire league and lost 2-1. I really don't see it as a result that makes or breaks Fulham's season. Would a point have been nice? Yes. I think denying Brighton the opportunity to get 3 points would have been probably the biggest positive of that result. But I also don't, I think it was Dan who mentioned on Monday's podcast that we cannot read too much into anything right now. And he raised such a good point that if Fulham had won on Saturday, we would be talking about the Champions League. Or certainly you could have scrolled down X and you would have seen several tweets saying there's no reason Fulham can't finish in the Champions League.
But that's how close the league is right now, right? Like that's the kind of thing. Everyone between Forest in third, okay, maybe not after the weekend, but before this game, everyone between Forest in third and Fulham, where we were in, I think it was 10th. I think we're 10th now. It might have been 9th at the time.
Yeah, 10th.
You know, could have gone to Champions and played Champions League football. You know, the most informed team in the division outside of Liverpool who are running away with the league is Crystal Palace, who are in the bottom half of the table, right? And behind them it's Brighton. So you're kind of looking at that and thinking this is a bit of a topsy-turvy thing. You know, anyone between can beat anyone from sort of third down to 15th, 14th. And that's a weird place for the whole Premier League to be. And this is going to twist and turn loads more times. The thing is that, you know, these are the games that equally you kind of do. It's not to read into it too much, and I don't necessarily read into the result too much because I think you're right. Anyone can lose to this Brighton side, especially in the form they're in, with the amount of talent and the players coming back that they have at the moment. They're a really, really good side, and I think they have a very good shot of finishing in the Champions League places. I think I was more disappointed with the performance than I was with the actual result. And whilst you can attribute some of that to Brighton just being very good, you can also attribute some of it to Fulham not making the right decisions, both tactically and in possession when we had the ball, and allowing ourselves to be penned in that second half to an extent where when the goal came, it felt almost like, well, that's been coming.
Yeah. What I think I find a little bit frustrating about Fulham this season is pretty much I can think every team above us in the league has had a run. We have not had a run at any point this season where we have been on a solid set of wins in a row. We still haven't won 3 league games in a row this season. And there was a bit of an unbeaten run October, November time where I think we may have even got either close or very near to 10, I believe.
But that also included a draw with Southampton at home, you know.
Yeah, it included a bucket load of draws. Even Bournemouth, Villa, Brighton, Newcastle, they've all been on these big runs.
Villa maybe not. Villa may be the only exception to this rule, but Villa are a side who are currently in the round 16, potentially quarterfinals by the time you listen to this, of the Champions League. Like, they have other fish to fry. We don't really.
If they hadn't have had the Champions League, I think Villa would be a lot higher up the table. That's definitely not too much to say. So, but also that gives me some hope that maybe Fulham's time is coming, because I think if you look at Brighton, who have just put 4 wins together in a row, if Fulham did 4 wins in a row at any point between now and the end of the season, we're looking very good for Europe at the least. I did have a look to see whether Liverpool's defeat in the Champions League would mean that potentially England might lose this coefficient place.
It's going to take something absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, I was quite surprised because changing this away from Fulham for a second, you actually think now about the English teams in Europe. I think it's very likely that England doesn't have a semi-finalist in both the Champions League and the Europa League.
Yeah.
Because you think Villa going to face PSG if they win tonight. Well, I think no way. Not that PSG.
Yeah, but Unai Emery's a funny old fish.
Yeah.
He does this sometimes.
Do you back Arsenal to be either Madrid side?
No, I don't.
And with Spurs,
I also take great pleasure in the rest of the English sides going out of European competition. Generally.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you do.
It just stops this entire nonsense narrative that the Premier League is just completely dominant and anything apart from financial sense. Like, it's incredibly frustrating when people are like, West Ham win Serie A, wouldn't they? I'm like, what are you on about? Like, obviously they wouldn't win Serie A, they'd finish mid-table. Like, it's just a really weird narrative that seems to pervade the English game, that there is this kind of God-given right to being superior, and it just isn't true. And so every time the English clubs get knocked out, I know in this case we're talking about we want them to do well in order that the coefficient stays so there's an extra European place, and I get all that. But I do take great pleasure when they get knocked out by teams that they're like, what do you mean we lost to them? French league is farmers. All right, mate.
Yeah. I don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not. I do think also I've looked into it, and to be honest, they can all go out. It doesn't seem
it's also safe. It's fine.
Yeah, so that's a relief. Let's move on to the Crystal Palace game. Now, we did the pod last Wednesday, and then the ticket prices for Palace got announced on the Thursday. So by the time that had come out, and we didn't say that we thought they were going to be really, really expensive. We actually just hoped that Fulham would do a good thing and price them sensibly, because this is a massive game.
Which they have done.
And I was kind of like, well, there we go. Fulham have done a good thing. And I tweeted saying, well done, Fulham, but when the ticket prices came out, because I really do try to, give praise where praise
100% credit where credit is due.
And then I kind of thought, right, part that one. There'll be ticket things in the future, but Crystal Palace, we can all just
enjoy ourselves,
sleep soundly, and it's not a drama. It's been quite the fiasco this week regarding the sale of these Crystal Palace tickets. So if you're not 100% caught up, I mean, if anyone that's a season ticket holder will have had to go through the process of finding their season ticket on the Fulham website and trying to reserve their seat.
For the first one, I didn't realise this was going on. So I am just sitting in a different part of the Hammersmith End.
Okay.
Because I didn't realise that was where my ticket was.
Oh,
when
so
I
you
clicked onto it, I just was like, well, this is what's left on the map. So I just picked up tickets.
Oh, so you bought a different ticket not knowing...
So those ones will be released. So there's at least 2 to come back.
Okay.
And me and my brother's tickets at some point are going to come back.
I managed to sort it. I had a 20-minute conversation with my dad on the phone doing Fulham's IT tech support for them, trying to talk him through how to get his reserved ticket. But Clive...
It would have been a lot easier if you just took his password. Anyway, it's a separate argument.
Yeah. Well, I was driving at the time, hence why the password option wasn't available to me. But yeah, Clive got there in the end. He's got his ticket. I'm sure everyone's listening.
Yeah, everyone's relieved.
Thank God.
What
would we do? But I think the mad thing is how they've put these on sale. So first of all, obviously the Putney End season ticket holders who are Fulham fans can't use their normal season ticket because pretty much the whole Putney End is going to Crystal Palace.
So what is it? P1 and P2 are going to be blocked off?
Yeah.
And then the rest of it is Palace?
Yes.
Okay.
I kind of understand why the club has done that. Yes, you could argue there's now going to be 2 blocks empty, but is it worth the police, the stewarding and all of that?
Yeah, I can understand
that. For the segregation of basically P1, like it seems a little bit unnecessary. And actually, maybe the club have done a decent thing here, not taking 6,000 Palace fans and taking the extra money because they don't want so much away support in the ground.
Yeah, fine. Hands up. That seems fair enough to me.
But what the club did is they allowed all season ticket holders to buy 3 additional tickets each. But then through the Putney End season ticket holders in with the rest. So
they don't have reserved seats.
They don't have a reserved seat.
Right.
So I think there's now an issue whereby the Putney Enders missed it because and now they don't have tickets for this game, even though they're season ticket holders. And I think the club was stunned by how quickly the other tickets were snapped up by season ticket holders. So much so they've had to actually change the release schedule of this and now give the displaced Putney Enders a special window before now members can buy a ticket, effectively probably leaving Fulham members without any chance of getting a ticket, you would have thought. I am quite flabbergasted because I remember when I saw that it was going to be 3 per season ticket holder thinking, wow, that seems high and slightly overly generous.
Yeah.
And they've made a real problem for themselves here.
Well, I think it was Mike Gregg, who was on Twitter at MJG, who was talking to Alistair Mackintosh years back after the playoff final. And basically when they let Fulham season ticket holders buy 4, I think, if I'm right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the same thing happened at Hamburg.
And I think the club have talked about this in a variety of things recently, but also in meetings with the FST, etc., that they basically believe in the kind of second-hand market, that Fulham fans will buy tickets from other Fulham fans and that everyone will work themselves out to get a seat. And look, in Wembley, when there was 40,000 seats, that was kind of fine, right? Like, it kind of worked out. But in this situation, and you'd imagine that obviously the percentages are higher and lower and lots of different things, but in this situation, it seems to have just slightly changed in that obviously there are less seats available because season ticket holders are already kind of accounted for. I think also the fact that, I had that confusion with the ticket thing before I saw what was going on and we were just like, right, we'll just get them and then we'll work it out afterwards. Felt like that moment where you're like, oh, okay, cool. So at least I would say there's going to be a couple of 100 seats that at least that go back where season ticket holders haven't clocked what's going on and have just vacated their season ticket seats in order because they just panicked and was like, I'm not going to get in unless I buy a ticket
Or they
now.
can't make it.
Yeah, of course. So like all of those things come into play. But I do think that, then you're talking with a far smaller proportion of seats. And then when people are picking up 3 every time because they're like, I'll get rid of one of these. And that does work, I think, generally as a system. Fulham fans tend to be quite good with, who they're, especially with season ticket holders, who they're bringing along with them or, all those things. So I'm not necessarily criticising that strategy. But I think in a smaller capacity stadium with some of it already blocked off for away fans, 2 blocks missing from that point, Riverside in a separate kind of category, and then this whole season tickets already having theirs reserved, the pockets of tickets looked really small. So I think people would have gone, right, let's just get them when we can. And that has probably led to a bit of a kind of run on it. That, even then my brother texted me, he was like, what's going on? I was like, it's fine, we got the tickets, this is where we're at. But there isn't many left. And you said that goes around the group and, my uncles, etc. You're like, make sure you get them. Like, they're going really fast. There's not many left. And then that starts a run. And I think that's probably what's happened here. And if the messaging had just been a little bit clearer, I don't want to sit on the club and criticise them too much for this, because I think the pricing's been fair. I think they've done probably the sensible thing in terms of what's going on with the away end at that point. And I think that when you put all of it into context, this tends to be a bit of a win. I just think the communication should have been there beforehand in order to tell you this is what's happening on, rather than having to rely on the Ticketmaster system, which we know for a fact is not the best in the world.
I think it just comes down to the communication. And I don't know if you've seen the latest Fulham Supporters Trust notes from February. It was a very frosty meeting between the trust and the club, and the club criticised the trust for its latest open letters, effectively saying that, what do you expect us to do with open letters? We can't respond to these, which...
Why not? The club could release an open letter.
I was a bit like, what? The trust have tried to communicate with official channels, much to their criticism, that they've tried too hard to keep things
within
orderly and within the channels, and suddenly they release an open letter and then they get criticised for that. And maybe the fan advisory board will help with this. And this is what something that David Claridge from the fan advisory board said when he came on Fulhamish, is he said the club often have good meaning, but the communication is bad, and also they don't use the resources available to them. I think the Fulham Supporters Trust, definitely, I can't speak for the fan advisory board, but I do know enough people at the FST, would have told them that 3 tickets per season ticket holder, this is a really in-demand game that everyone's going to want to go to, and everyone's going to want to bring a mate or two to if they get the chance, because it's a big, big cup game. And I think the FST would have said to the club, if they'd have asked them...
Maybe make it 2.
Well, they'd have just said that, just be careful, don't give season ticket holders carte blanche to buy loads of tickets for their mates. Season ticket holders that have done that, I've bought a ticket for a mate, have done nothing wrong, because we're season ticket holders and we're just doing as we're allowed. But actually, it's created a massive problem now, whereby members who pay quite a handsome amount of money per year, it's £50 for a membership, now have a really realistic prospect of not being able to go to a game just through pretty poor planning. Yeah. Now, of course, mistakes happen and that, but I think the FST would have told them, and that's what the FST have been asking the club for years. Let us in on the conversations. If you're not 100% sure what the fan sentiment is, whether a game's going to be completely in demand or whether it's going to actually, no, you need to open this out, no one's going to fancy going to Wolves on a Tuesday night, ask us. We're here. We're willing to help. We're volunteers. That's all we want, is the best for the club. Yeah. And it just seems that time and time and time again, they fail to use the
resources
help available to them. And this is a classic situation of that, because the FST would have taken one look at that and gone, that's going to sell out really quickly, because we all know how big a game it is.
Yeah, of course. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's just a question of utilising those things. And again, the pricing's been reasonable.
And that is great.
Right? No, but that will help.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
In terms of actually, if you were like, I'm going to get a ticket for a friend, and that friend might be a Fulham fan, and it would, who might not be a season ticket holder or a member or whatever, but they'll be like, I'd love to go down to the cottage. I'm probably not going to pay £80 for it, to watch us play Palace, but I might pay 30. Seems very reasonable. I'd love to be part of that, and the atmosphere will be really good because it's reasonably priced, and therefore people will go. So
It's
like
a consequence of their generosity.
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, you've just got to communicate. And like, even the kind of small bit about this, the reserved seats ending up in, a weird little bit, like you say, having to spend half an hour working people through the process to try and get their own reserved seat. The fact that I just didn't realize that had happened until I'd already gone through the process is all part of this. If that had all been laid out the night before, this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to be. When you log into your Fulham account, it should be in the first banner across the middle saying, here, click here for your reserved ticket and you can get your season ticket. You're like, brilliant, fantastic. Instead, you're having to drift through 5 different pages in order to get there. Like, that's basics. It's not rocket science to make communication and ease of access and people understanding the system at the forefront of what you're doing for this.
The other thing on this, Jack, in the FST notes that I thought was particularly interesting, obviously we talked with Dan Crawford for that Manchester United game about the possibility that the club could subsidise tickets for away fans. It should be mentioned, and it didn't come up given how exciting everything was at United. It was very much a side point. It was not sold out at United, and quite far from it. I was on the right-hand side of the away end where there was loads of empty seats, basically. I would say there was probably there's a few hundred, definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say it was about 80%, 85%.
There's definitely a few hundred empty seats around, and obviously tickets were incredibly expensive for that game. My ticket was £52, which hurt as it came out of my bank account. And so we talked about the prospect that the club could look at doing something like subsidising tickets down to £30 in order to make it more appealing for Fulham fans. The only thing that it said in the FST notes is Alistair Mackintosh said the club decided not to send a cheque to support Manchester United's funds from the Fulham chairman.
That's not what this is. That's not how it works.
Well, exactly.
Like, the tickets were there. The club had to buy the tickets anyway, right?
Well, the tickets get split. So the proceeds of every ticket, 45% goes to the away club. So 45% of every ticket goes to Fulham. So that money comes back to you.
But also, surely Fulham could have done that within their own charity. It wouldn't have had to be like, okay, we're going to pay you this much for these seats. It would have been per ticket sold, right?
Yeah, well, because it's different how it works in a league game. In a league game, yes, that if they were to subsidise tickets like that, that would be straight out of the club's purse. That makes sense. But cup tickets, the club was receiving over £1 million from the gate receipts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just one of those where
I couldn't
talk
believe
about communication, right? Like, that's a statement that doesn't make it. If the club were like, we're not going to do that, then I would have been like, that's a shame, but okay. But like, to make a statement that's just factually not correct seems really odd. Like, that's not how it would work, right? I wouldn't go to Manchester United in the same way. Like, that's very strange. It was a strange conversation.
Yeah, and also just but you're happy for Fulham fans to cut Manchester United a cheque by the same accord.
By your same token, right? Yeah, live and die by your own sword.
Yeah, so I don't think statements like that are going to help stop the chance. Right, we will take a break, and afterwards we'll look ahead to Spurs on Sunday. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. Sammy here on the Thursday Club with Jack. If you're heading to the game against Spurs on Sunday, make sure you pop into Craft Beer Co. at Hammersmith Broadway, a beautiful family-run pub with a wide selection of different ales, beers, ciders, wines. Honestly, it is a fantastic place, particularly if the sun is shining. They've got a lovely beer garden as well, so do pop into Craft Beer Co. right next to Hammersmith Broadway. Then after the Spurs game, we are doing the Fulhamish live show at the Half Moon Putney. I am informed that as of Wednesday afternoon, there's 4 tickets left.
You better, get in there fast. Gone, as they say.
There is a link in the description of this episode and on YouTube. And we've also maxed out the guest list as well. Everyone that's on stage has decided to bring about 1 million friends and family to it. So we literally have no more. Like, that is it. So there's 4 tickets left. And if you've got your tickets, we are eternally grateful. We cannot wait to see you there on Sunday. Do stick around afterwards as well. I'm told that the Half Moon will be showing the Carabao Cup final. We'll be around. We'll be having some beers. We'll be having some drinks. We'll be sticking around. Paul Cooper is our special guest on stage, which is very exciting. So we'll be doing 3 parts. We'll be doing a live This Will Catch On. I've been told that there are some absolute belters in the live This Will Catch On. Are you excited? You missed the last one. You must be.
I did miss the last one. I'm really excited to be back on stage. It's going to be lots of fun, and yeah, I can't wait. The only problem is that they have tended to come after bad results, haven't they? Like
mixed. It's been a mixed record.
So I remember the first ever one. We lost 3-1, 3-0, 3-1 at home to Coventry City.
Yes.
And that was bad. Callum O'Hare ran us completely ragged. And I remember being on stage being like, I don't really know what to say apart from I really like Callum O'Hare.
The first ever one was after we drew 2-2 with Charlton. But it was but that was at the old Suffolk Punch.
Yes.
Back in the that was a lot then
back when the old Suffolk Punch existed.
Yeah, and we had Gentleman Jim, Barry Hales as our and Sean Davis as our special guests on that one. So yeah, no, it hasn't generally tended to follow great results. We did beat Sheffield United once.
We beat Sheffield United in that game where Chris Basham got that terrible injury.
Yes,
that was a tough day at the office for everyone involved.
Yeah, bad things. Okay, well, let's hope it's a nice.
It's not been great. Yeah.
Let's hope it's all nice on Sunday against Tottenham Hotspur. FC.
Thank you.
Wow, what a season they've had. I remember thinking when we got a draw at the Spurs Stadium. When was that? November?
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking...
I don't remember much of that game,
Oh,
to be
yes.
honest.
Have we talked about this on the podcast?
I think we might have done the week afterwards, but I was in hospitality and...
I thought you were going to say in hospital, because that's nearly where you ended.
Well, I would describe it as thus. I treated Spurs hospitality like I was at a wedding. Like, that's the kind
it's the last days of Rome.
That was the cadence. They were like, do you want a glass of champagne? We're like, yeah, don't mind if I do. I've never been in hospitality before, and so I decided I was going to take full access of their hospitality, which I did. It was a busy day.
We were walking up the Seven Sisters Road from Tottenham back to Seven Sisters Station, and it was it wasn't full on raining.
It was drizzly.
It was definitely drizzly. And I just looked to my left and saw these 2 guys wearing black coats just on a bench outside a bar, just kind of looking into space. And I was like, oh that's that's Jack Collins and his dad.
It was a busy day. We were waiting for an Uber. We weren't just staring into space. But yeah.
And I got a hug from your dad that lasted way too long.
The big huggy people, the Collins family, love a hug. It was a heavy day.
Anyway, so yes,
I won't be doing the same this weekend, thankfully, for everyone coming to the live show.
Oh god, it was very funny. But anyway, what I was saying is I remember coming away from that game, other than seeing you and worse for wear, thinking what a great result. We got a draw away at Tottenham Hotspur. Not many people are going to do that this season. You know, a great point for Fulham, especially with down to 10 men. And then since then, everyone's gone to Tottenham and blooming won.
Yes.
And it doesn't quite look as good a result as it did back then.
No, it definitely doesn't. I mean, look, I was going to say it's been a season of ups and downs for Tottenham, but that's just not really true, is it? Like,
I think this is...
it's been a season of downs.
It's been a nightmare. And obviously, you have to put it in perspective. They're not going down and all of that. We've had worse seasons. But if you're Tottenham and you spent that much money and expectations are so high, it's been a full-on... nightmare.
Yeah, it's been desperate, right? And look, they've had a wild injury crisis that has plunged them into the depths of despair at times. And they seem to be coming out the back of that a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're recording this before their home leg against RZ Alkmaar in the Europa League round of 16. I'm going to say. And they're currently 1-0 down in that tie, so it's going to be intriguing to see if they can progress from that. Ideally, they win the 90 minutes 1-0. They are dragged through extra time, to the extremes, and then they lose on penalties. I think that's the ideal situation for us.
Yeah, well, that's what Newcastle United would have been delighted about, seeing Liverpool do.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Like, that's exactly where you want them to be. That's where you're looking for, and especially because there's on Thursday night rather than Tuesday night, it would have even more of an impact on what is already a pretty rabid
At the very
squad.
least, you want it not to be a situation where they're 3-0 up after
20 minutes.
at half time and they're able to take all the big guns off.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, some of the big guns are already off, right? Because Dejan Kulusevski is currently riding the injury bench, as they might say in the States. And obviously Dragusan out for the whole season. Ben Davies been nursing a knock for a couple of weeks. And Richarlison still in and out of this squad. They have had some returnees. Wilson Odebear is back and I thought looked very good again in their draw with Bournemouth. They've also got Christian Romero back and Mickey van der Ven came off the bench in that game. So like the worst is past from a Spurs perspective, but I thought the way that Bournemouth sort of ran them ragged for 60 minutes was quite something. Now, credit to Spurs because they fought back from 2-0 down. Yes, the first goal was a bit fortunate, and yes, the penalty, I don't know what Kepa's doing, but they still had the mentality to actually get through that. And you know what? If that had been the other way around, imagine what people have been saying. People were talking about this game, and I thought this was a good talking point the other day. People were talking about that game being like, oh, plucky Bournemouth, Iraola must be the guy for Tottenham. Like he could be. If Tottenham had been 2-0 up and had lost, had drawn 2-2 from that position, people would be talking about bottlers. And I was like, if someone was discussing it in terms of Iraola potentially be the next manager, I was like, think about how the expectations differ. Think about how these things are portrayed in the media. I thought Spurs did really well to fight their way back into it. A little bit of luck with them. And I think that they are getting better. If we played Spurs at the end of February, I would have really fancied it. Like really fancied going and not just beating them, but potentially giving them a hiding. And they have had players return to the squad. They do feel like they found a bit more of a midfield balance. Certain players are starting to pick up their form a little bit again as well. And I think all of those things are important. I still think that Fulham can win this game. Now, what that looks like from a Fulham perspective, I'm not 100% sure I know. Now, do Fulham stick with the 5 at the back? My hunch is no. Not at home, not against a side like Spurs who have played midweek. I think it's take the game to them. They've been really poor defending in transition. They've been really poor defending through the middle of the park. Can you go and set about this Spurs side who will have had a big midweek fixture where all of their attention has been focused on, because that is their last hope of saving, in inverted commas, this season? I think you get at them straight away. And I think you don't do that with a 5 at the back. I think you do it with a 4. And then the question becomes, with Sasha still suspended, who slots in that midfield? Now, I would drop Emil Smith-Rowe for Harrison Reed. I would go with Berger, Reed and Andreas, because I think that Andreas in there gives you a little bit more of that on-ball ability and, ability to create from deep that perhaps Sasha does. You kind of don't necessarily, you play him normally as the 10, but you play him in a role that kind of combines a little bit of both. He's also better when Emil Smith-Rowe isn't on the pitch. And after ESR went missing again on the South Coast, I mean, we don't know if he's back yet. The Coast Guard have been called. But like there are, elements of this that you're kind of thinking about it and going, where is he? What is he doing? And Andreas at least always puts it in. I think you want the legs and the running in there to try and get this Spurs team. And I think that a midfield of Berger and Reed and Andreas does that. Then you have to, figure out exactly how you're going to play it with the front 3. I think Raul probably did enough to keep his spot. I think Iwobi definitely keeps his spot. And then maybe you go Willian or Sessegnon on the other flank. I'm not quite sure exactly how that
What about Smith-Rowe on the left?
It didn't work. And look, again,
he didn't play fully on.
Well, he nominally was the left-hand side of the attacking trident, right?
Yeah.
And actually what he did was so predictable that it just meant, and Dan talked about this again on Monday's pod, but he basically didn't ever go around the outside, which meant that the left back or the right back, Jack Hitch, would never had to deal with him. He just could be like, well, he's not going to come out here. So I think you can't get away with it right now. To be honest, when he signed, I thought that was the role he was going to fulfill. I spoke about, I thought he would play the Willian role, but we've not seen enough of him in those spaces to suggest that he has enough unpredictability to try and fool a defender. And I think that that's a problem in those areas.
I wouldn't mind seeing it though, because I think he's not necessarily, in my memory, been given the opportunity on the left-hand side when we've played 4 at the back.
No, he hasn't. But I think there's probably a reason for that. The reason that Marco doesn't fancy it for whatever reason, considering when he came in, a lot of us thought he was going to play.
Was the reason for that because we had a lot of left-sided players and there was no need to put Smith-Rowe there? You had Reece Nelson, obviously, at the beginning of the season, and we've had Iwobi there for most of the season because he's great on the left, and you don't need Iwobi on the right because we've had Harry Wilson and Adama Traore.
Yeah.
Look, for me, it would be...
Do we know how long Adama's out for?
No, I remember them saying it wasn't as bad as first feared when the injury happened against United. So I don't think it's hugely long term.
So there's potential that Adama's back, in which case he slots straight back into the team, right?
Yeah. But I think, look, for me, I've said it for a while that I'd love to see Cess get a start. I still think that he's got a little bit of magic. And
against his old club.
Oh.
Narrative. I do like narrative.
Well, yes. I mean, now to put him up front.
Stick him in the 9.
But I'll just start him straight away. That would be my choice. But I'm trying to think with my Marco Silva hat on here of what he does. Clearly, Willian's not going to be ready for the start. Don't know what you do. I just wonder if Smith Rowe fills a gap and maybe could have an opportunity. I've been kind of very anti Smith Rowe and Andreas playing at the same time, but I think part of that has been Andreas in the 8.
I'd probably rather see Josh King on the left, to be honest.
I mean, I'd take that too.
Yeah.
But then again, from someone that can't get off the bench at the moment to suddenly starting against Spurs,
I just think something has to be shaken up after that performance. Like you can't perform like that. Like yes, I did it the weekend.
And in fairness, Marco,
and then just keep your place. So that's just not okay. You're meant. We've spoken about this at length, so I don't want to go all the way into it again. But
no.
You are our marquee record signing. You cannot go missing in games like that.
No, and to be fair, recently, we had a bad performance against Crystal Palace. What did he do next game against Wolves? Shook it up. Yes, okay, there was one eye on the cup for that game, but still, I do believe that whilst he did do that for the cup, I also think he did that to send a little bit of a message, and it sends a good message. We beat Wolves and we're very good in the game.
Yeah.
So a Josh King would be incredibly fun. Fun.
No, I mean, I think that would be fun, but I'd be surprised if Marco does it. I'm wary of playing a 5 at the back here. Look, maybe this comes back to bite me, and I hope it does, right? Maybe he plays a 5 at the back and we win 3-0 and everyone's like, oh, what a masterstroke. I just don't hugely like it in this situation. And I think that when you get the better of Spurs by really, really pinning down their fullbacks and getting those overloads in those areas, because we've seen Jed Spence really start to shine on one side. We know that Pedro Porro is a very good defender. Destiny Udogi's back now. But they're all very good players in their own right.
Yeah.
And Spence in particular, from a defensive aspect, obviously former Fulham, someone who has been really, really impressive in one-on-one defending. How do you get past a really impressive one-on-one defender? You overload them, right? You create mismatches in their heads, so they're having to be at 2 places at once. And I don't think Fulham can do that with a 5 at the back system.
No, and the 2 times that we've played at home this season, unless I'm mistaken, have been Bournemouth and Ipswich, and neither of them went particularly well.
No.
Bournemouth, in fairness, we actually
you take the point.
We very nearly won the game that day, but
they were the better side.
But particularly Ipswich was a pretty desperate performance that we were lucky to come away with the point. Let's go on to some emails. Love this one from Matt Roberts. Matt is part of the Brilliant Tennis Podcast.
Oh yes.
If you like your tennis, there is no finer tennis podcast. I'm telling you that. Yeah. Mostly because Matt's on it. Obviously, it's all Matt. He says, "Hello, Fulhamish, long-time listener, occasional emailer. Got a couple of questions for the Thursday Club. Number 1, what keeps happening at 1-0, including the cups? We've taken the lead 18 times this season. On 15 of those occasions, we've conceded the next goal and been pegged back to 1-1. Our record in those 15 games is 6 wins, including the penalties at Old Trafford, 5 losses and 4 draws. The 3 occasions we have scored to make it 2-0, we've gone on to win the game. I'm not sure how that stat compares to other teams, so maybe it's not as alarming as it sounds, but I'd be interested to hear your take on why it's happened so regularly. How can we not turn more of these 1-0 leads into 2-0 leads and perhaps see out the games more comfortably? Only keeping 1 clean sheet at the Cottage all season so far, in a game where we failed to score ourselves, feels like a related issue."
Yeah, I think that's probably bang on. It's a weird one, isn't it? Like that's a strange stat. I don't think the percentage of completion when you go on to 2-0 is weird. I think that would probably be quite similar for a lot of teams, that when you go on to take a 2-0 lead, you tend not to throw it away. That's why people like betting odds and people like Paddy Power pay you when your team goes 2-0 up, because it's so rare that you kind of
it's quite a widely debunked myth about 2-0 being the most dangerous scoreline in football.
Yeah, it's pretty safe. But that we've conceded the next goal that many times is stunning. Like that is wild. And I don't know what the answer is. I'd have to look into it a little bit more deeply. But I think that is a pretty nutty statistic, considering we've looked at it and thought we've had a pretty good season.
I think for me, and this is not a reason why we're doing it, but I just think we've always got a goal conceded in us. Now, part of that is the quality of the Premier League is just so high that every team that you face has got quality players who can punish you. But it feels like so many times this season, I'm like, okay, Fulham are doing well here. Oh, what? And we do concede in every game. Fulham, both teams to score is one of the safest bets this season.
There was one in the Championship where that won me a lot of money one year. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but there was a lot of cash won on sort of £10 on Fulham on both teams. £10 on both teams scoring the Fulham game every single week was a very, very good bet. But I think it might be to do with mind state. And look, we've come back to this, and again, it was something kind of briefly touched on the podcast on Monday. But is there a slight lack of leadership within this side? You know, to make sure that heads are on in the right moments, and I think that's probably true. Right, like I said at the start of the year, and I thought the Joachim Andersen coming in was something that was potentially going to address that. But I think it might just be a lack of people standing up and taking accountability, right? You know, Tim Ream was very much that figure in the dressing room for such a long time. We have a club captain in Tom Kenny, who is still a wonderful player and a wonderful bloke. And some of the things that have come out from that night at the cottage he did seemed very, very, you know, one, the club is so close to his heart, but two, you know, just a good person to be around and very much loved in the dressing room. But, you know, in terms of a player that doesn't play that many minutes, what's the impact of having that lack of a leadership on the pitch? And, you know, this is one of those things where, you know, you kind of want those players to stand up. Our big dressing room characters seem to be people that everybody love rather than, you know, players who are just like, right, we need to actually, you know, get our heads in and focus here. Now, I wonder if that's something that probably plays into it a little bit, just in terms of if we go 1-0 up, it's like, right, we go again straight away. It's not to enjoy this quite as much as perhaps we do. So maybe there's something in that.
Yeah. Next one is from Max Tomlinson. Now, we did mention this earlier about the Palace tickets, but thought worth mentioning. Max says, hi, I know a lot of people, me included, are very happy about the ticket prices for the Palace game in the Cup, but I do have an issue with the ticket structure. As of Monday, 10th March, the game is pretty much sold out after just being on sale to season ticket holders, as they can get 5 per person, according to Max. I didn't realise it was that many. I thought it was 4. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. I no longer have my season ticket for financial reasons and travel reasons, as I'm at university, so I have a membership instead, so I can make away games at the £30 cap and home games when I visit home. I was really looking forward to going to Palace at home, as I've been to the 2 previous rounds away at Wigan and United in the FA Cup. But people who are friends with a season ticket will be at the cottage for such a big game, but not people like me unless I pay £80 on a resale site. Just seems weird in my opinion. Apologies for the negative content, but just thought I'd share my thoughts. I really feel for him.
Yeah, completely. 100%. Like, as in, has absolutely every right to feel aggrieved with the way that this has worked out. And, you know, that's something that you talk about, the kind of human side of things, right? Like, the club will be like, well, we sold all the tickets. And they're right. Like, from a business side, from a financial side, they're correct. But it completely excludes people like Max here, who, you know, hasn't been able to do that despite the fact that he has followed. And there is, I do think this is something that happens with other clubs, especially in Europe, where the clubs, I know Newcastle do it with like Carabao Cup final tickets. You know, it's the tickets go first on sale to the people that were at the games beforehand. Yeah. And I think that that's a really good strategy in terms of these things and making them work.
Yeah. I think most clubs do something similar. I was weirdly looking at Aston Villa's tickets for Preston, and that goes to people that have been to some of the cup games. Now, cynically speaking, that's partially because they are trying to incentivize you to go to those cup games and buy the less attractive tickets for Cardiff at home that they played in the 5th round, because actually go to Cardiff at home, you'll get a ticket to Wembley and all of that.
But it works, right? Like, it might be a bit cynical, but it works. And then you get packed away ends, and then you get packed grounds, and then people go.
I think that people like Max are what annoys me when I talk to people about this who maybe haven't fully thought it through, and they say, well, I'm happy because I've got a season ticket holder. I'm happy to just charge the tourists all the money. You know, if they're just going to come to games, they can subsidise my season ticket. And I always feel like I'm having to say, there are so many people like a Max who they've gone to university. Like, it'd be mental to go to university and keep your season ticket, really. Like, unless you have the financial means
to do. Or you're in London.
Yeah, okay, yeah, if you're at Kings or whatever. But if you've gone up to, I don't know where Max is, but I assume it sounded like North if he's gone to Wigan and United. I went to Leeds. I didn't keep my season ticket when I went to Leeds University, because I was not going to make it down every weekend. And there's so many people in that boat. There's people at university, there's people that have kids.
People just moved, right? Like there's certain people, and I'm part of the Fulham fans in Ireland group, and these people fly over. Pretty much every week there's a couple of people flying over from Ireland, and to have a season ticket there would be nuts because you're not going to, but 4 or 5 times a year, maybe more for some guys, they're flying over, and this is a major opportunity and a big game, and a lot of them have travelled across again to United and Wigan and been in these areas as well as the home games that people fly over for. Like, why should those people be punished? A lot of the people, some people in that group are Fulham fans by birth, some are Fulham fans by, osmosis. Some of them have been here and moved across and, and are now back home. And I think when you're kind of looking at it from that perspective, those are the people that get hurt, Max. People who have travelled away, people who've moved away, people who are coming from elsewhere who travel down and, probably pay more than what our season ticket prices are to get over to the club, 5 times a season with all the travel included. All of those things matter. And I think these people sometimes get really forgotten about, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, I think no member, or no reasonable member, is there expecting to get preferential treatment over season ticket holders. I think everyone understands, okay, yeah, season ticket holder, fair enough. You put your money in and you commit to the season, you deserve first dibs. But I don't think season ticket holders deserve first dibs to go and buy 4 tickets for their mates.
No,
and
absolutely
then
not.
Making a membership completely, and having a membership being completely pointless. I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
I think if you were a member and you had a fair chance and there was a couple of thousand tickets left for members and you just missed out because there was too many people, I think a lot of people would understand. But when you didn't have a fighting puncher's chance,
you got to have a puncher's chance.
This one from Greg Palm. Hello, love the podcast. Thanks for what you do. I'm an American that first started following Fulham in the early 2000s when some of the first Americans were getting looks by European clubs. I was a teenager when Bride and Bocanegra were on the team, then the Dempsey years, followed by Ream and Robinson. The US isn't an untapped viewership market anymore, but there are still many American Premier League fans that don't follow one team. As Fulham fans and Brits, how do you guys feel about potentially prioritising Americans or any other country to build finances and international exposure for the club? The US is hosting the next World Cup, and it could be a way to capture casual soccer fans. When Pulisic joined Chelsea, there were suddenly tons of Chelsea fans in the US. Now many Americans are following Serie A because of the success of Americans in Italy. I'll bring up the example of Leeds, Jesse Marsh as a coach, then getting Brendan Harrison, Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, followed by relegation. Also, could this potentially worsen the ticket price? But let's not go into that. Just wondering how you guys felt, as I think a player like Johnny Cardoso would be a good fit for Fulham next year if we need more depth after we qualify for Europe. I mean, I'd love to have Johnny Cardoso, not just because he's American, because he seems like a very great player. Not trying to take a good player away from Real Betis.
Stop nicking players from my other club. Yes, no, Johnny would be excellent. I think he's kind of Premier League ready at this point. Sadly, Tottenham seem to have first dibs, having bought an option. No, but they bought an option on him. I don't know if you saw this last summer.
They did.
They basically gave themselves, it was really weird, they gave themselves like first refusal. They paid a fee to do it.
Did Tottenham put the option on him, or did Tottenham Hotspur put the option?
Oh,
there might be a technicality
we can. Spurs as well.
Well, there's got to be a technicality we can expose.
We'll try and look it out. He's going to San Antonio. But when I think that there are lots. And look, I think that it's not an untapped football market anymore. No, you're absolutely right. But there are plenty of players. The one that I really liked in the summer that Fulham were linked with was Tanner Tessman, who's at Lyon and has been here and there around the team. But I think that there's plenty of very, very talented footballers. I think that Fulham probably need to smarten up in terms of recruitment from MLS, because I think that now we're starting to see MLS as a league that is prioritising developing young players, and we're seeing a lot of promising young players come through. Now, I don't mean that as a kind of US, all be all and end all, but Fulham have links there, not only with the chairman, and obviously the strategy that exists around that, but also in terms of a historical basis and a historical basis of USMNT players succeeding at the Cottage, right? I think Fulham probably need to widen their scouting outlook anyway, right? And maybe that's something that is to do with the coaching. Maybe it's something to do with what Marco wants, that he needs certain players in certain areas, and that's fine. But I think there are plenty of moments in this and plenty of opportunities. Obviously I work pretty much basically American facing in terms of all of the kind of football journalism I do, and whether that's on radio or podcast or whatever. So I have maybe more of an affiliation to the States than most. And some people would say, well, you could say that about any market. You could say that about Brazil. You could say that about Uruguay. You could say that about, the North African market, which is producing a ton of brilliant players at the moment as well. But I think that considering Fulham's links and considering the strength of the operation that should be available to Fulham there, our footballing director owns a company that runs media and analytics within an American market. Like, can you branch that out to work within the confines of football over there as well? Like, there feels like there's the base, we've already got base camp, and we're just not exploring up Everest at all. And I think that's, for me, is the thing that frustrates me a little bit about it. And, we have a draw there. Obviously there is the history of American players, but also Anthony Robinson, who is, pretty much Fulham's on-field captain these days.
American as they come.
Play USMNT as they come, plays for the club. And you could utilise that, I think, as a draw. We've seen groups of players flock to, certain nationalities of players flock to certain pieces before. And we had this with, the Lusophonic term in terms of Brazilians and Portuguese players coming through. And I think that makes sense, given Marco Silva, given his coaching staff, given the basis that was there. But you can utilise that in a number of different ways. And I feel like we're probably not tapping that market as much as we potentially could.
I think, to play devil's advocate here, though, slightly, I would feel uncomfortable with Fulham recruiting players on the basis of basically marketing. I think that's
not what I mean.
No, I know you're not, but that's what is being suggested in this email slightly, is that, should Fulham sign an American because they're American because it will lead to new fans? I mean,
no, yeah, fair.
And because I also think that America is not the only place where that can happen. There's a big now Mexican interest in Fulham because of Raul Jimenez.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the comments, if you go
never forget the Junichi Inamoto gang.
Yeah. A lot of the comments on Fulham's social media is often from big Raul Jimenez fans in Mexico. So I think that pretty much any player that you can sign, there will be a fan base from that country that is beneficial to Fulham.
Sure, but like I would probably just flip that to one point, in that I think that Mexico football's been the dominant sport for forever, right? And therefore the market isn't likely to grow that much, whereas it's the fastest growing market in the US. And I don't mean, I'm with you, we shouldn't be signing players because it would be a marketing tool. That's a one-way ticket to hell, basically.
Yeah.
But I think that there are enough players in the kind of US sphere. Now, whether that's USMNT players, USYNT players, or just players from other countries who are playing in MLS, I think there is fertile ground to be tapped in terms of a recruitment that we already have one kind of finger in terms of what we have as an ownership. And so if our ownership were from Greece, I would probably take this email with a pinch of salt. Not necessarily in terms of, but I would be like, well, there's no obvious connection apart from the fact that we've had a historical link with USMNT players. But given that there is already a link with our ownership and the model that works and all of those things, I think that there is probably more that could be done in terms of tapping that market. And look at someone like Miguel Almiron, who perhaps didn't set the world on fire when he moved to Newcastle, but was a brilliant servant for the club for so many years, and was one of the biggest trades ever out of MLS. And you're thinking, well, if that's the market, then Fulham should be at it. And I know TJ Fogarty, who we both know, was saying for years that Fulham should have moved for Jack McGlynn, who ended up switching within MLS this season. I think he left the Union, and I think he's at Houston now. In fact, I know he's at Houston. And, that was a deal that wasn't that expensive. It was a $3, $4, $5 million deal for a player who has a massive upside. And you're thinking, I'm not saying Fulham should go out and spend £40 million on, whoever top scored in MLS last season. We're not going to buy Denny Bouanga from LAFC. We're not going to go buy Christian Benteke from DC United. But I think that there are players in the league who you could probably look at and be like, we could probably get a cut price rate for, who have the capacity to go and be a success. And there are small gambles you can take in the transfer market that potentially have big upsides. And I think that's why that market feels untapped from where I'm standing.
I think the thing that I found perplexing really under the Khans, and you see it at Bournemouth, how much they're dialing into the US. They're really, they're doing the summer series. They've been to the US ever since that they were bought by American investors. Fulham have never tapped into that. We talked a lot about this.
We did go to the summer series once. You went.
We did the summer series once. I don't think, though, that Fulham have ever gone like the US is our thing. And I'm surprised by that. I'm not, whether it's for better or for worse, I don't know. We've not gone to the summer series this year. Whether we were invited, I'm not 100% sure. I'd be surprised if we go there on a pre-season tour. I thought that when we got American owners and given our history with America and the fact that I know from research that Fulham punches well above its weight in American support, given the size of the club. Obviously, when there's no one saying that Fulham have more supporters in America than United or Arsenal.
But like per size of club. Yeah, of course.
Compared to a club like, well, I'm not trying to just do them down here because they're our rivals, but like a Brentford or something like that.
But I'd say Fulham's fan base in America is probably similar to someone like a West Ham.
Yeah, it's a sizably big American fan base considering we aren't that big an English club.
And Brentford are growing theirs because they've got a link with Charlotte, which is incredibly annoying.
Yeah, but I think that I've been surprised that the Khans never really have seemed to see the importance of it, short of there being kind of a little bit of Jacksonville Jaguars crossover. But if anything, what the Khans have tried to do strategically with Fulham is move the Jags over here. That seems to have been the bigger play as Fulham helping them with a foothold of making the Jags a UK team. Because the Jags do a lot, our friend Reese Parkinson hosts the Jags UK podcast. And they've really, really tried to build up a following over here. And the other way round doesn't seem to be a priority. Is that right? Is that wrong? Who knows? But I've just been surprised.
It's noticeable. It's not necessarily a criticism or praise. It's just noticeable.
Yeah. So, look, Johnny Cardoso incoming.
Tanner Tessman, Johnny Cardoso.
Just get them all in.
Give me a little Diego Luna as well, just to really spice things up.
Oh, yeah, nice. He's in the squad, isn't he?
He is in the squad, yeah.
Right, we'll leave it there for the podcast today. Thank you very, very much for listening. If you come into the live show on Sunday, can't wait to see you there. It is always a really, really fab occasion. Speaking of America, actually, we should probably mention that we have a new podcast coming to the Fulhamish podcast feed over the international break called Full America. More details to come, but it is a dedicated podcast on this feed, regular as well, talking all things Fulham in North America. Got to be key to say that, not just the USA, but also Canada and Mexico as well. So more details on that to be announced shortly. But that will do for today, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. It was a pleasure.
We will be back on Monday.
On a live show.
We're doing the live show, and then the live show audio will be released on Monday if you can't make it down to the Half Moon Putney. And then this time next week, we'll be doing a special Thursday club with the live rendition of the This'll Catch On from the Half Moon Putney. So if you're going to Spurs this weekend, enjoy the game. Wherever you're watching it, though, have a fab one, and come on, you Whites.
You Whites!